My name is Griffin Miles, and I've worked at Solace Strategies for 9 years. I remember the day I walked into the lobby in my first interview, eager, nervous, convinced this was the place where I would prove myself. Over the years, I stayed late to polish proposals and crafted pitches so persuasive that clients sometimes asked to speak only with me. When the firm landed its first major international account, I organized travel logistics and delivered a presentation that turned skeptics into believers. I sacrificed birthdays, anniversaries, entire weekends, all to ensure Solace thrived. Each success felt like a victory not just for the company, but for my wife, Celeste Hawthorne, who would beam with pride as her right-hand man. As she climbed from senior director to COO and ultimately CEO, I celebrated alongside her, never questioning that my own sacrifices would one day reap equal reward. That reward should have been the obvious next step, the promotion to Chief Strategy Officer, a title that would cement my place in the firm's history. Instead, I learned the truth behind the closed boardroom door. I stood behind the frosted glass, heart pounding in my chest like a drum announcing an invasion, as Celeste concluded the meeting. When she emerged, her eyes avoided mine, her posture stiff with apology. She placed a hand on my arm, an awkward gesture, half affection, half obligation. Her voice trembled when she said, "The position went to Asher Knox." She paused, searching my face for an understanding I did not feel. "Nothing personal," she whispered, as if the phrase alone could smooth over years of devotion. 22 years old, fresh from a business school whose name she had dropped once while bragging to friends. Asher, the handsome new boyfriend who carried her gym bag to the cliffside runs she sponsored in press photos. I felt the betrayal as sharply as a physical blow, my vision narrowing to the painful thrum of blood in my ears. I recalled each late-night conversation in our living room, mapping out financial projections on her laptop. I remembered how she once described me to investors as my secret weapon. Where was the secret now, and who wielded the weapon? My mind raced, remembering sacrifices made with pride. The weekend I skipped Jacob's soccer final to finalize a supply chain deal in Rotterdam. The anniversaries I spent on conference calls instead of sharing a candlelit dinner. Pride gave way to something colder. I stepped toward her, forcing my expression to remain calm. I touched her hand back briefly and felt the distance between us grow infinitely in that moment. "Congratulations to Asher," I said, my voice low and even, betraying nothing of the anger coiled inside me. She blinked, surprised that I could muster a polite smile. "I hope he earns it." She nodded, relief flooding her face as though I had accepted the insult. But I had promised myself in that instant that this would be the last time Solace Strategies swallowed all that I was worth without consequence. Later that evening, as the city lights blurred beneath the airplane's wings, I replayed the conversation over and over. My hotel room felt colder than any boardroom. I stared at the ceiling, counting the scrollwork patterns until dawn. By sunrise, I knew exactly what I would do. My loyalty had been mistaken for weakness. My devotion had been mistaken for servitude. I refused to be the invisible architect of someone else's glory. I rose quietly, brewed coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and reviewed files on my encrypted laptop. Files detailing 17 separate corporations I had built from scratch, entities that operated in sectors ranging from analytics to supply chain management, each one a top client of Solace, and each registered under different names and addresses to ensure professional distance. Without my efforts, those contracts would dissolve like sugar cubes in water. As I drafted the first of 17 termination notices, I felt no remorse, only a glimmer of exhilaration. My hands moved swiftly across the keyboard. "Dear company name, we regret to inform you that effective immediately, Solace Strategies will terminate service level agreement #. Each email carried the weight of years of unacknowledged effort. Every subject line was a calculated strike, severing ties that had contributed 72% of Solace's revenue. By the time I clicked send on the final notice, the sun had climbed high above the skyline. I sat back and poured another cup of dark roast, savoring the bitter taste. Loyalty might be rewarded, or it might be exploited. Today, I chose to tip the scales. I did not attend the morning meeting at the firm's glossy headquarters. Instead, I watched alerts pop up on my phone, client inquiries, frantic questions from account managers, and the faintest tremor of panic seeping through every message. When I finally strode into the lobby at noon, my tailored suit felt lighter, my posture more upright than it had in years of feigned deference. The firm I helped build was hemorrhaging revenue, and the board had no idea whom to blame. As I passed through the revolving doors, I looked forward, past Asher Knox's startled gaze, past Celeste's forced composure, and into a future where recognition was no longer a courtesy to be begged for, but a standard I would command myself. People thought I was just a loyal husband playing second fiddle at Solace. The doting man in the tailored suit standing quietly behind his powerhouse CEO wife. The Mr. Hawthorne who smiled in press photos, poured wine at client dinners, and disappeared when the flashbulbs faded. But what they didn't know, what Celeste never told them, was that I wasn't just supporting her from the sidelines. I was the architect of every single major deal that kept that company afloat. You see, there are the public faces of companies, CEO handshakes and photo ops, and then there are the hands that actually hold it together. I was the latter. While Celeste smiled for Forbes and shook hands with Silicon Valley elites, I was back at the desk at 3 a.m., rewriting contracts, renegotiating licensing agreements, and drafting operational blueprints so tight even the regulators didn't blink. Every major client Solace had brought in during the last 4 years, I scouted them, courted them, closed them, and more importantly, I insulated them. Legally, financially, structurally. What no one at Solace knew, not even Celeste, was that I had built a web. 17 companies. 17. Each registered under different holding firms and licensing umbrellas across 5 states. Tech startups, logistics firms, AI analytics, supply chain integrations, fleet management, distribution platforms. I did it all quietly, carefully, methodically. They weren't dummy corporations. They were real, functioning, profit-generating machines. And the common thread tying them together? Solace. I made sure my companies became their biggest clients. Because if I couldn't get the credit I deserved inside Solace, I would control it from the outside. It started small. Just a back-end analytics firm I quietly acquired. I routed a project to Solace for evaluation. They loved it. Signed a year-long agreement. Never even knew I was behind it. That rush of seeing them praise something I built while not knowing it was mine, it did something to me. Gave me clarity. I wasn't being overlooked. I was being used. And I kept building. One contract after another, I wrapped my hands around the company from the outside. They depended on me more than they ever realized. But I didn't pull the plug back then. I wasn't cruel. I thought maybe, just maybe, Celeste would eventually see me. Not just as the husband, the helper, the advisor behind closed doors, but as her equal, as the co-creator of what Solace had become. Instead, she gave my promotion to a boy fresh out of business school, a boy she was sleeping with, a boy who had never stayed up through a deadline with red-rimmed eyes and 3 cups of coffee in his bloodstream. She didn't just ignore my worth. She erased it. So the morning after she gave my title away and called it nothing personal, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't drink or curse or call my lawyer. I woke up at 4:30 a.m. like I always did. I shaved, showered, brewed a mug of coffee strong enough to peel paint, and walked into my home office with the same precision I used to build empires. I logged into 17 client portals, opened 17 dashboards, reviewed analytics, client satisfaction scores, service level audits. Everything was clean. Everything was working. That made it easier. No loose ends. No excuses. Then I began scheduling them. 17 termination notices. 1 for each company. I templated the language. This notice serves as formal termination of our existing SLA with Solace Strategies, effective immediately. We regret that due to recent instability in leadership and breach of confidence, our companies no longer share aligned values. We appreciate the years of partnership and wish you the best in your future endeavors. Each message was tailored with just enough variation to prevent suspicion. I spread the delivery times across the morning. Some at 9 a.m. sharp. Others staggered to hit inboxes between 9:03 and 9:12. No sudden burst. Just a steady leak. Like a puncture in a pressurized tank. I looked out the window. The city below was waking up, horns blaring, sunlight bouncing off mirrored high-rises. And somewhere in the middle of it, Celeste was probably smoothing her hair in the mirror, unaware that the floor beneath her company was about to dissolve. I wasn't smiling. There was no joy in this. Only inevitability. These weren't just terminations. They were reminders. Reminders that I wasn't just a loyal husband in a pressed suit. I was the reason she had a company to lead in the first place. By 8:59, My hands hovered over the keyboard. One final review. 17 windows. One row of tabs. I opened my email client and hit schedule. Each message locked and loaded. At 9 a.m., the first one dropped. By 9:02, two more. By 9:07, I'd already received the first confused response from a Solace account manager. Urgent. Client requesting call regarding sudden SLA cancellation. Flagged for leadership attention. By 9:10, the CTO texted me. By 9:11, Celeste's assistant called. By 9:12, Celeste herself messaged me. Griffin, what's happening? I turned my phone face down and kept sipping my coffee. They weren't ready for this. Not because I had hidden anything, but because they had never bothered to ask what I was building while they ignored me. All those glossy presentations with her name on the front slide, I wrote them. The deals that saved Solace during the 2020 collapse, I negotiated them. I was the scaffolding behind the skyscraper, and they had just torn me out, assuming the building would hold. At 9:17, I opened Solace's official Slack account from my personal laptop and watched as the panic spread. Did anyone approve this? Why weren't we warned? Who owns these companies? By 9:30, the CFO called me and left a voicemail. Hey Griffin, can you come in today? We'd really appreciate your insight. There's some confusion. Confusion. That's what they called it. But I wasn't confused. I was calm. I had just unplugged the empire I built with 9 years of sacrifice. One contract at a time. And I had done it without raising my voice. Without a single angry word. That's the thing about power. Real power doesn't shout. It schedules. At exactly 9 a.m., the first email landed in Solace Strategies' general inbox. I sat back in my chair, the morning sun slanting through my apartment window, and watched the notification ping on my phone. It was beautifully mundane. A brief subject line. Notice of termination. SLA number 2045, followed by a curt two-line body explaining that our agreement had ended. No flourish, no apology, just a clean severance. I exhaled slowly, folding my hands in my lap. This was the culmination of 9 years of meticulous planning and unacknowledged labor. As the seconds ticked by, additional pings echoed in quick succession. 9 of my corporations withdrew simultaneously. Each message carefully staggered between 9 o'clock and 9:05 to avoid suspicion of a glitch. My heart, surprisingly, did not race. The real rush had come days ago when I drafted those notices, but now I felt only a calm certainty as I watched Solace bleed revenue in real time. The firm that had taken my dedication for granted was about to realize how much of its lifeblood I had been quietly pumping through its veins. I lifted my mug of dark roast, the steam curling like smoke signaling revolt, and took a sip. Bitter, yes, but invigorating. It tasted like justice served cold. Outside, the city awakened. Horns honked, like messengers weaved through traffic, and somewhere a coffee grinder roared. Inside, Solace's smooth exterior was fracturing. By 9:06, I saw the first sign of panic. An internal chat thread lit up with alarms. Urgent. Client X SLA canceled. Who authorized this? Is our legal team aware? This looks coordinated. Something's wrong. Closing procedures initiated? The trolls of chaos I had unleashed thrummed beneath the firm's polished facade. I leaned forward, thinning the distance between triumph and compassion. I still remembered the late nights spent debating service-level adjustments, the collaborative spirit that once defined Solace's culture. But that world had died when Celeste replaced me with Asher Knox, and in turn, a boyfriend, a man who never once bore the weight of a global portfolio on his shoulders. At 9:08, a call came through, Celeste's assistant, voice shaking. Griffin, there's an emergency meeting scheduled in 10 minutes. The CIO wants your input. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I already knew they would beg. I paused for a moment, tasting the irony. After all those years of offering strategic guidance, I would now be summoned to salvage the crisis I'd engineered. I texted back, I'll be there, and closed the chat window, savoring the rush of power that coursed through me. Then I stood, straightened my tie, half out of habit, half for ceremony, and walked to the door. When I entered Solace's conference suite, it was a scene I would have once described in glowing terms. State-of-the-art AV equipment, ergonomic chairs, a boardroom table polished to a mirror finish. Only now it smelled of panic, coffee forgotten in ceramic mugs, papers strewn like fallen leaves, and faces drawn tight with fear. Asher Knox sat at the head of the table, his posture collapsing as he scrolled on his tablet. Celeste hovered by the screen, exuding brittle tension. The CIO motioned to an empty chair beside him. "Griffin," he said, voice wavering, "we need you." I sank into the seat, eyes flicking across the room to drink it all in. The CFO frantically flipping through balance sheets, the head of legal biting her lip, investors on the conference call demanding explanations. I cleared my throat. "Good morning," I said evenly, each word measured. "I see there are questions regarding our client portfolio." They nodded, relief and apprehension mingling in their expressions. The CIO glanced at Celeste, then back at me. "Can you shed light on why 17 of our top clients have terminated SLAs at once?" Silence settled like a fog. I tapped my pen against the table and explained, "Each of these corporations is separate, legally distinct, but collectively responsible for 72% of our revenue. Their SLAs were terminated for breach of service due to leadership instability and failure to meet contractual deliverables." Celeste's eyes widened, searching mine for denial. I remained calm. "They cited a clear breach of confidence, effective immediately," I continued. "I've seen the notices myself." Murmurs rose around the table. The legal head whispered, "But breaches? We've met every metric for 9 years." I nodded. "That's precisely the point. No one noticed when I built the network, and no one noticed when I withdrew it." The board members exchanged glances. The CFO cleared his throat. "Griffin, what can we do?" I let the question hang like smoke in the air. "I can reinstate contracts one by one," I said, "but only if leadership recognizes that loyalty and competence must be valued. Otherwise, these companies will find no reason to return." I watched Celeste's face drain color, the veneer of control cracking. She opened her mouth, closed it, then offered a trembling, "Please, let's discuss terms." I leaned back, folding my arms. "Recognition isn't a gesture. It's an acknowledgement of tangible contributions. You have my terms." As I stood to leave, the room felt smaller, the lights harsher. Phone stopped ringing, breaths paused. I offered a polite nod to Celeste, no warmth, no forgiveness, and walked out, each step deliberate. Outside, the hallway stretched like a runway to freedom. The empire I had built was crumbling, yes, but from the ruins, I could construct something new. I smiled, not for revenge, but for clarity. I had learned that true power isn't in titles or photo ops, but in the ability to shape reality itself. And this morning, reality had bowed to me. 17 contracts unpaid for acknowledgement, 72% of revenue paused on a digital precipice, and I held the switch. Every empire eventually requires an architect bold enough to redesign its foundation. Today, I was that architect. I walked into Solace's glossy offices at exactly noon, the sliding glass doors parting like theatrical curtains to reveal the chaos that had erupted in my wake. The reception area, normally so pristine it felt sterile, was littered with abandoned lattes, crumpled memos, and ringing phones wedged between shoulders and ears. An executive assistant's eyes met mine briefly, her expression a mixture of relief and panic, as though she had been waiting for me to restore order. Beyond the reception desk, the open-plan workspace had transformed into a crisis center. Project managers huddled in tight circles, heads bent low over laptops. Junior associates dashed back and forth clutching smartphones, and somewhere, a printer churned out urgent faxes declaring urgent, immediate action required. I paused, letting the tenor of the room wash over me. The fluorescent lights glared overhead, bouncing off glass partitions that once projected the illusion of seamless productivity. Now each cubicle looked like a lifeboat drifting on a stormy sea, its occupant clinging desperately to spreadsheets and slide decks as the tide of insolvency lapped at their heels. A flight of stairs led down to the trading desks where I had once delivered impromptu tutorials on client relationship management. Now, wires lay tangled on the floor, and an intern sat frozen, staring at the barriers on her dual monitors as the profit graphs imploded in real time. I strolled past them, unhurried. My suit felt different in this moment, less like a uniform and more like armor. Asher Knox stood near the coffee station, his pastel shirt soaked at the collar from too many nervous gulps of Java. He was attempting to reassure an investor via video call, his tone jittery as he explained away the sudden slashes in service agreements. "We're working to resolve this," he said on speaker, blinking into the camera as if the lens might project some stability. The investor on the other end shook his head, disdain palpable even through digital static, and ended the call mid-sentence. Asher's shoulders slumped. I nodded at him in passing, my greeting measured, then continued towards Celeste's corner office where the epicenter of this storm awaited. Outside her door, two staffers spoke animatedly, their voices hushed but frantic. "How does this even happen?" one asked, eyes wide. 17 major clients? Gone in one morning. The other shook her head. "It has to be sabotage or a system error. Why would our backbone just quit on us?" They glanced at me as I approached, and then fell silent, waiting for my answer. I allowed them a moment to register my presence. 9 years of history folded into my gate, the weight of every proposal and contract I had ever touched. Then I pushed through the door. Celeste stood at the far end of her office, framed by floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. The sunlight sluiced in, illuminating her silhouette and casting long shadows across the marble floor. Papers were strewn across her desk in an entropy of reports and balance sheets. She spun around when she heard the door click closed, her expression flickering through hope, confusion, and fear. The expensive heels she wore clicked against the polished surface as she moved toward me, arms outstretched. "Griffin, what is happening?" Her voice trembled, brittle with desperation. I studied her face, every line and contour reflecting the broken trust between us. The soft curl of her hair, once so carefully arranged to project confidence, now seemed disheveled. Her tailored jacket hung slightly off-kilter, a metaphor for the balance she had lost. I recognized the moment. This was her breaking point, the instant she realized that her carefully constructed empire had been built on the foundation I provided. I placed one hand in my pocket and held her gaze without wavering. "Market correction, I think," I said quietly, as if delivering a weather report rather than shattering her world. My tone was neutral, clinical, an echo of the same detachment she had shown when she handed my promotion to Asher. She blinked, trying to parse the meaning behind my words. Or perhaps leadership instability. The corners of her mouth twisted downward as understanding bloomed in her eyes. "But you can fix this," she whispered, words heavy with pleading. "These are your accounts, your companies." I took a step forward, closing the distance between us. The office felt smaller now, walls pressing in as if eager to witness my decision. I lowered my voice so only she could hear. "I was going to," I said, "but then you gave my title to your intern with benefits." No name, no recrimination beyond that one pointed phrase. She flinched, lips parting as though to defend herself, then closed her mouth again. I saw in her eyes the memory of every time she had taken my advice in private while basking in the public applause wrongly attributed to her alone. Silence stretched between us, charged with the weight of 9 years of shared ambition and unspoken resentment. Behind Celeste, the office beyond her glass walls struggled to recover from my orchestrated exodus. I watched a cluster of vice presidents pace the corridor, terrified mutters escaping their lips like smoke. Even here, in the headquarters she ruled, the air tasted of panic and regret. I straightened my tie, a habit I had formed in boardrooms and crisis meetings long before today's conflict. I turned slightly, nodding toward the window. "It's not too late," I said. "We can restore these agreements if you choose to acknowledge that I built them." My words hung in the air, a lifeline thrown across a chasm of betrayal. She swallowed, throat bobbing as she processed the ultimatum. Her voice was barely audible when she finally spoke. I'm sorry. Let me make this right." She took a step toward me, but her reaching hand trembled. I watched, heart tempered by a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Every year I had stayed silent, believing our partnership would blossom into equal recognition. Instead, my silence had been mistaken for complacency. Without another word, I turned and walked toward the door, the click of my shoes echoing through the suddenly hushed office. Behind me, Celeste's voice rose in a plea, but I didn't look back. The moment for reconciliation had passed with the echo of those 17 termination notices. As the door slid shut, I left behind more than a crumbling enterprise. I left behind the illusion of partnership built on unacknowledged labor. From this day forward, I would build anew, anchored by recognition, not the echoes of a title withheld. The board assembled that afternoon in the same hushed grandeur where I had once envisioned my triumph. I stepped into the oak-paneled room, its walls adorned with framed mission statements and glossy photographs of triumphant teams. A single long table stretched before me, ringed by high-backed leather chairs occupied by faces I'd known for years, some I'd mentored, others who had once vouched for my promotion. Today, they looked at me with a mixture of wariness and hope. The CFO, pale and tremulous, gestured to the chair at the far end. "Griffin, thank you for joining us," he said, voice barely concealing relief. I nodded, but made my way to the center seat, equidistant from all watching eyes. At the head of the table sat the board president, a man whose stoic demeanor rarely betrayed emotion. As I took my seat, he cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. "We've convened on short notice," he began, tone measured, "because we need answers. 72% of our income evaporated this morning. Can someone explain how that happened?" The question hovered above us like an accusation. I inhaled slowly, scanning the circle of faces. Asher Knox perched nervously beside Celeste, the CTO tapping a pen against a stack of financial reports, and the outside investors on Video Link, their corporate logos flickering at the screen's edge. In that moment, the polished veneer of authority peeled away, revealing the vulnerability of a company unprepared for its own fragility. I straightened my back, smoothing the creases in my jacket. "I'd be happy to explain," I said, voice calm but confident. The board president inclined his head, granting permission. I leaned forward, placing both palms flat on the table as if to anchor myself in the gravity of my words. Each of the 17 corporations that terminated their SLAs this morning is independent, legal, and distinct. Their contracts collectively generated 72% of Solace's revenue. I explained, eyes sweeping the room. Those agreements cited breach of service and failure to meet leadership obligations. Murmurs rippled through the board members. Breach? Failure? As astonishment spread, I paused, letting the weight of the revelation settle. "The board has prioritized internal politics over performance," I continued evenly. "By awarding the chief strategy officer role to an intern with no track record, you signaled to our clients that loyalty and competence are secondary to personal relationships." They responded by exercising their legal right to withdraw. Celeste's mouth opened, closed, and her knuckles whitened on the tabletop. Asher's gaze shifted to the tablecloth, avoiding mine. Across the room, the CFO shifted in his seat, suddenly aware of the precariousness of his own position. The board president's expression remained neutral, though his fingers drummed a rapid rhythm. "You orchestrated this?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yes, I arranged the terminations. I built those companies to safeguard us from complacency, but I did not expect to have to use them against Solace itself. However, after 9 years of unrecognized service, I felt obligated to demonstrate the cost of overlooking true contributors. A silence descended so thick that even the hum of the air conditioner seemed loud in comparison. "Is this vindictive?" the external investor on the Video Link asked, voice trimmed by corporate courtesy. "Because if so, we need legal counsel immediately." I met the camera's lens and replied, "Not vindictive necessary. A lesson in accountability. If Solace expects to remain a leader in the industry, it must value merit over manipulation." The screen flickered as the investor absorbed my words, uncertainty etched across his features. Celeste cleared her throat and rose to her feet, her posture unsteady. "Griffin, please," she said, voice quavering. "You know I never meant harm. I made a mistake. We can rectify this, promote you, restore your title, even grant you equity." She lifted a white envelope from beside her notes, pressing it toward me as though it contained all the world's apologies. I reached past it without touching. "I don't want a title," I said, meeting her gaze. "I want recognition and respect for the work I've done. You had 9 years to give me that. I no longer need Solace's validation." A gasp rose from the board members. Even the board president's eyebrows twitched. "Then what do you want?" he asked, voice firm. The question rippled through the room, carrying the gravity of a crossroads. I folded my hands and studied the polished tabletop, tracing the grain with my gaze. "I want autonomy," I said at last. "I will offer to reinstate those contracts, under one condition, that I serve as an independent partner, with authority to oversee strategic partnerships directly, reporting only to the board itself, without interference from Solace's internal politics. If you refuse, those 17 clients will remain with the companies I founded." The table fell into stunned quiet. Celeste's face flushed crimson. She slammed a hand on the table, rattling water glasses. "You can't be serious," she exclaimed. "Do you realize what you're asking? You're demanding control over the very board that rejected you." I lifted my chin. "I'm asking for the recognition I earned. and the respect that should have been extended years ago. If you want your clients back, this is the path. If not, I'll build something better. Another silence filled the room. The board members exchanged knowing glances. The CIO tapped his pen. The CFO cleared his throat. One investor rubbed his chin. Finally, the board president spoke, his voice measured like a judge delivering verdict. We will consider your proposal. We will convene tomorrow morning to discuss terms. Until then, we request you abstain from any further action. I nodded, standing slowly. Understood, I replied. As I walked toward the door, heads turned, I was tracking my every step. The weight of 9 years of unseen labor and unspoken resentment had finally been laid bare. I paused at the threshold, glancing back one last time. Celeste stood motionless, her face a mask of regret. The board president leaned back, fingers steepled in thought. The rest of the room seemed to shimmer with uncertainty. Then I closed the door gently behind me, leaving them to ponder the fallout of a boardroom funeral I had delivered with quiet precision. Outside in the hallway, sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating my path forward. I felt alive, more than ever, knowing that I had shattered old expectations and carved a new direction from the remnants of a broken promise. Celeste trailed behind me through the gleaming marble corridor, her heels echoing like hesitant footsteps of a plea-seeking refuge. The boardroom doors had closed behind us, sealing away the stunned gasps and whispered conjectures I had delivered with quiet precision. I paused at the intersection where the glass walls gave onto the city vista, the skyline shimmering with indifferent indifference. She stopped a few paces back, her breath uneven, as though she had run a race she never intended to win. I felt the tension in her posture, the tremor in her voice when she finally spoke. Griffin, please, wait. I turned slowly, resisting the urge to soften my expression. For 9 years, I had tempered my reactions for her sake. Now, I needed clarity, not consolation. Celeste's face was drawn, ashen under the fluorescent lights, every line etched by regret and unspoken apologies. She lifted a trembling hand. I made a mistake, she said, voice thick and raw. I never meant to hurt you. None of this was personal. You have to believe me. I studied her, recalling the day I had first walked into Solace Strategies, bright-eyed and determined. She had embraced me then, and I had dedicated myself to her ascent. But this moment was different, a reckoning, unfiltered by boardroom facades or press releases. The air between us crackled with shattered expectations. I folded my arms, choosing my words with care. You weren't scared of my power, Celeste, I said, the words deliberate and measured. You were scared I didn't need yours. Her jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought she would snap, would lash out with the arrogance that had once made her so formidable. Instead, she exhaled, shoulders slumping as the weight of my accusation settled upon her. She swallowed, eyes glistening with unshed tears. Name your terms, she whispered, voice thin with desperation. I inhaled the sterile scent of the corridor, the faint hum of the air vents resonating beneath our feet. I want recognition, I said steadily. Not just in name, but in authority. I want to reinstate those contracts, yes, but under my leadership as a partner, reporting directly to the board. I want equal ownership in the company I built just as much as you did. I want my title on the door and my voice in every strategic decision. Celeste's eyes widened, flicking toward the distant office lights as if searching for reflexive support that had evaporated. That's a tall order, she stammered, her tone fractured. You know what that means. The board will balk. They'll resent ceding power to you after they chose someone else. She bit her lower lip, the same way she had done during tense negotiations when stakes were high. But then her posture straightened, determination flickering back into her gaze. They respect you, Griffin, she added, voice steadier. They respect what you've done. I can convince them. I remembered each negotiation where I had been the silent hand guiding her triumphs, each presentation she accepted as her own. I recalled how she had credited Asher for his proposals, though he had merely repeated bullet points I had supplied. Respect isn't enough, I said quietly. I want partnership, shared responsibility, shared profit, shared authority. If you can't deliver that, then no apology, no title, no equity will fix this. A swirl of emotions crossed her face, fear, resolve, remorse. She bit her lip, then exhaled, nodding once as though anchoring herself to my demand. All right, she said. I'll take it to the board. I'll advocate for your role as partner and chief partnership officer, your name on the door, 50% equity, direct oversight of client relations. I'll do whatever it takes. Her voice wavered, sincerity bleeding through the strain. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling a mix of vindication and fatigue. It wasn't revenge I craved. It was justice tempered by fairness. I opened my eyes, meeting her gaze. That's the start, I said. But understand, I won't be your secret advisor anymore. You'll hear me in every board meeting. You'll see my decisions reflected in every contract. She nodded, swallowing hard. I understand. Then she hesitated, her expression softening. I'm sorry, Griffin. For every night you missed with our son. For every dinner I missed because I was chasing headlines. Her voice broke, and I felt a pang of sadness, not for myself, but for what we had lost. I lowered my arms and took a step closer. We both lost something, I admitted, recalling birthday parties skipped, anniversaries spent at separate ends of a conference table. But this is our chance to rebuild, together, properly this time. She reached out, brushing her fingertips against my sleeve. Together, she agreed, voice small but resolute. Then she squared her shoulders, as though preparing for battle. Let's go to the board. I led the way, each step echoing with the promise of a new chapter. The corridor stretched ahead, the glass walls reflecting the city's pulse. We walked side by side, no longer as husband and wife bound by invisible servitude, but as equals forging a genuine partnership. Behind us, the boardroom doors would open again, this time to an offer they could not ignore. A man who had built their firm from the shadows, stepping into the light. Ahead of us lay negotiations, contentious debates, and the hard work of earning trust anew. Yet as we approached the threshold, I felt a sense of calm purpose. I had set my terms. She had accepted them. Now it was time for the firm to recognize the value that had always been there, unacknowledged but undeniable. We paused at the door. Celeste inhaled, then exhaled, and I placed a hand on the handle. As she met my eye, I nodded once, a silent affirmation that despite the chaos, we were aligned. I turned the handle and pushed the door open, stepping into the room where my future, and Solace Strategy's future, would be decided. 3 days later, I stood outside the minimalist glass facade of Larkwood Solutions' new headquarters, the morning sun reflecting off polished steel and tinted windows. It was surreal, this building that I now called my own, one of the 17 companies I had quietly founded and nurtured in parallel with my career at Solace. I drew a slow breath and walked through the revolving doors, the click of my leather shoes echoing through the lobby like a private victory march. No longer hidden behind Celeste's shadow, I felt the crisp air of autonomy filling my lungs. Inside, the reception area was warm and bright, a stark contrast to the tension and panic still gripping Solace. The walls were adorned with abstract art that suggested motion and progress, and sleek wooden benches invited guests to settle in. Under a recessed spotlight, a chrome-plated plaque bore the name Larkwood Solutions. Beneath it, in etched steel letters, read G. Miles, founder and CEO. I paused to take it in, the weight of recognition settling over me like a well-tailored suit. Nora's voice called my name before I saw her emerge from the corner office. There she was, former executive scheduler to Celeste, always indispensable, yet chronically underpaid. She moved toward me with a confident stride, her smile bright and genuine. Gone was the nervous tension that had marked her under Solace's fluorescent lights. Now her shoulders were squared, her eyes alight with purpose. When she reached me, I shook her hand, noticing the firmness of her grip. "Welcome to your new office, Mr. Miles," she said, voice warm with respect. I placed a hand on her shoulder. "Please," I corrected, "call me Griffin." She nodded. "Of course, Griffin. Let me show you to your corner suite." We rode the glass elevator to the top floor, the city unfolding beneath us like a living map. When the doors opened, I stepped into a spacious office bathed in natural light, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of the skyline I had once only glimpsed from Solace's boardroom. The room was furnished with modern elegance, a walnut desk polished to a deep sheen, a modular leather sofa positioned for private meetings, and a low credenza displaying a single sculpture of intertwined metal strands, symbolic of connection, I assumed. Nora moved to the desk and opened the drawer, retrieving a sleek nameplate that she placed beside a slender glass vase holding a single white orchid. "Founder and CEO," she said, smiling. "It suits you." I thanked her quietly, settling into the high-back chair and feeling the leather adjust to my weight. For the first time in years, I felt truly at home in my own achievement. Behind me, Nora placed a framed photograph on the credenza, our Solace Strategies client team celebrating a major contract win. I frowned slightly. Is that appropriate? I asked. She shook her head. I thought you might want a reminder, not of Solace's collapse, but of what you built. I studied the image, my younger self beaming alongside Celeste, maps and charts splayed across the table. Then I smiled, understanding her intention. Keep it, I said. It's part of the journey. Nora inclined her head, then stepped out to retrieve my tablet and phone charger. While she was gone, I walked to the window, the city humming beyond the glass. I felt the energy of possibility stretching out like sunlight on concrete. Here, I would craft a new sanctuary, for talent overshadowed, for ideas dismissed, for professionals undervalued. Larkwood wouldn't just be another corporate identity. It would embody the principles I had fought so long to assert: meritocracy, respect, partnership. When Nora returned, she handed me a printed agenda, our first week's strategic priorities, including client outreach, staffing approvals, and branding rollout. I scanned the top line. Welcome to Larkwood Solutions, leadership meeting, 2 p.m., conference room A. Beneath that lay a list of former Solace colleagues I had invited to join: Luciana Vega, Tarek Benson, and Nika Chowdhury. Each one passed over by Celeste, but bursting with talent. I felt gratitude swell. These were people I had silently supported, and now I could lift them where they belonged. At precisely 2 p.m., I led the meeting in a polished conference suite whose glass walls framed the city's bustle. Luciana arrived first, her sharp gaze softening into a relieved smile as she shook my hand. Tarek followed, briefcase in hand, and Anika drifted in moments later, exuding quiet confidence. When all were seated, I addressed them directly. Thank you for trusting me. You know what happened at Solace. I won't dwell on that. What matters is that Larkwood Solutions will be different. Their nods were steady, their faces open. I outlined our vision: bespoke analytics services, agile supply chain integrations, and proprietary AI-driven decision tools. We will deliver excellence, uncompromised by politics. I promised. We will build together, profit together, and succeed together. Luciana's eyes gleamed. Finally, a place where our work speaks for itself, she said. Tarek leaned forward. I'll set up the financial controls, complete transparency. Anika tapped a pen thoughtfully. I can recruit more talent, she offered. With every affirmation, I felt the sanctuary solidify. Over the following days, Larkwood's press team drafted a release. Larkwood Solutions emerges as industry disruptor under Griffin Miles' leadership. Quotes from industry analysts predicted rapid growth, and social media buzzed with excitement. Meanwhile, Solace's PR remained entangled in crisis statements and mea culpas, their brand tarnished by headlines like Solace's sudden collapse, when favoritism betrays a firm. Every time I saw Solace mentioned, a mixture of pity and vindication washed over me. Pity for them, mired in regret, and vindication for me, steering a ship built on genuine merit. Late one afternoon, Nora knocked and brought me coffee. They're starting to call, she said. Potential clients, former colleagues, media inquiries, everyone wants to know what's next. I smiled, drained my cup, and tapped my fingertips on the desk. Let them call, I replied. We're ready. That evening, I stayed behind to finalize contracts with our first wave of clients, companies that once underpinned Solace's revenues. As I initialed each page and slid them across the desk to Nora, I felt the full circle of my journey. Where once I had crafted deals in the shadows, now I signed them in the light. Every signature a testament to my rightful place at the helm. I locked the office and walked to the window, watching the city lights spark as dusk fell. In the glass reflection behind me, I saw a man who had shed old constraints. With the city sprawling below and the orchid beside me, I knew I had built more than just a company. I had built a sanctuary, one where talent was honored, effort was rewarded, and recognition was never withheld. And as I turned off the light and stepped into the elevator, I carried with me a promise that I would never again be invisible in my own success. In the weeks that followed my official unveiling as founder and CEO of Larkwood Solutions, I devoted every waking hour to building a culture that valued talent over titles, substance over optics. My first priority was to extend genuine second chances to those brilliant minds Celeste had overlooked, people I had watched rumored about in hushed corridors, whose accomplishments were downplayed in favor of boardroom theatrics. Luciana Vega once passed over 3 times for promotions despite her uncanny knack for closing complex negotiations, answered my call with cautious optimism. When she walked into my corner office on her first day, her posture hinted at uncertainty, as if she half expected another dismissal. I greeted her with a firm handshake and a clear promise. Here, your ideas carry weight. Your voice shapes strategy. Her surprise melted into resolve, and I knew we were on the right path. Next was Tarek Benson, the accounting prodigy whose models had caught the eye of the CFO at Solace, only to be buried beneath layers of bureaucracy and favoritism. Tarek arrived clutching a slim portfolio of his projections, charts, and graphs that transformed risk into opportunity. We met over a single espresso in the Larkwood Cafe Nook, the morning sun filtering through low-hung pendant lights. He leaned in, excitement tempered by years of disappointment. "I've been ready for a chance like this," he said. I nodded, already envisioning the streamlined financial controls he would implement. "You'll have full autonomy over budgeting and forecasting. No gatekeepers. No hidden agendas." His smile was the kind I had chased for years. Then there was Anika Chowdhury, whose quiet brilliance in user experience design was overshadowed by louder personalities at Solace. Anika had built intuitive interfaces that clients raved about. But internally, her work was credited to teams rather than to her singular vision. When she accepted my offer to join Larkwood as head of product design, she arrived with a modest laptop and a notebook filled with sketches so meticulous they looked like art. In our first brainstorming session, she laid out a plan for a new client portal that would set industry standards for accessibility and insight. I leaned back, watching her presentation, and realized she had been waiting for this stage her entire career. Together, we gathered at the grand conference table that overlooked the city skyline, which by now flickered with the glow of countless windows. Our team assembled, experts in strategy, data science, design, and operations, each one recruited from the ranks of the undervalued. I opened the meeting with a simple declaration. At Larkwood, second chances aren't charity. They're strategic advantage. We are building a sanctuary for the best minds who have ever been denied the spotlight. I watched their eyes light up as I unveiled our roadmap, cross-functional teams empowered to set their own goals, a flat organizational structure that prioritized collaboration over command, and a profit-sharing model that aligned individual success with company growth. Luciana tapped her pen against her notebook and said, "We'll need to redefine our brand voice to reflect this ethos." Tarek chimed in, "Our financial projections must include contingency reserves. Volatility is our friend, not our enemy." Anika sketched wireframes on the whiteboard. Clients will navigate our platform in ways they didn't even know were possible. Each contribution built on the last, and I felt a surge of pride. Not in having orchestrated this, but in witnessing innovation that had been stifled for too long. Meanwhile, word of our progress traveled fast. Former Solace colleagues began reaching out, intrigued by Larkwood's rapid ascent. Offers of partnership, inquiries about equity, each message a testament to the shifting tides. But I remained focused on execution. I invested in personalized onboarding experiences, welcoming each new hire with a tailored roadmap and one-on-one mentorship sessions. I created a recognition wall in the lobby, featuring photographs of our team members with captions highlighting their key achievements. When Luciana secured our first Fortune 500 client under the Larkwood banner, her image went up in lights, an affirmation of the value she had long deserved. As we celebrated our first quarter results, revenue growth that surpassed projections and client satisfaction scores that set new benchmarks, I found myself reflecting on the contrast between my two worlds. At Solace, my efforts had fueled someone else's narrative. At Larkwood, every milestone felt personal, every victory shared. I walked through the open plan office that evening, pausing to congratulate our teams. I caught sight of Anika demonstrating a prototype to a potential client, Tarek deep in analytics on his dual monitors, and Luciana engaged in a spirited debate about market expansion. Their energy was contagious, their belief in our mission unwavering. In the midst of this whirlwind, one call surprised me most. Asher Knox, fresh from his 2-week Bali retreat and no longer welcome in press releases, left a hesitant voicemail. "Griffin, it's Asher. I'm available if you ever need advice on youth engagement strategies." I smiled at the absurdity. "No, Asher, Thank you, but no. Our sanctuary wasn't built for interns on jet lag. It was built for those who had weathered storms and emerged stronger. Celeste's offers of equity and partnership still hovered at the edge of my inbox, but I had moved beyond that chapter. When I finally replied, I wrote, "Thank you, but my path is here, with the people who believed in me before it was convenient." I clicked send, feeling the freedom of choice I had so long denied myself. By the end of the quarter, Larkwood's brand was recognized as an industry disruptor. Major publications featured profiles of our leadership team, each story centered on the theme, elevating the undervalued. Clients praised our responsiveness and transparency. Competitors watched with unease as our momentum built. But more importantly, within our walls, a culture of genuine respect thrived. I often found myself standing at the recognition wall, reading the captions, remembering the nights Luciana stayed up perfecting her pitch deck, or the weekends Tarek sacrificed to fine-tune risk models. Each photo told a story of redemption and resilience. As I sat in my glass-walled office one late evening, overlooking the city lights, I felt a profound sense of fulfillment. I had not only built a company, I had vindicated the hidden strengths of brilliant people. Larkwood was more than a business. It was a testament to what happens when recognition is granted, rather than withheld. And as I leaned back in my chair, I knew this was just the beginning. Second chances, handled my way, would continue to reshape industries and redefine what it meant to succeed together. One evening, well past the hour when most offices dimmed their lights, I sat alone in my corner suite at Larkwood Solutions, the city skyline a glittering tapestry beyond the glass walls. The glow from my monitor illuminated lines of analytics and projections, but my mind drifted to Solace strategies and the chaos I had left behind. A soft chime announced a new message in my inbox. I glanced at the sender. It was Celeste, her email address unusually unadorned by corporate signature. My heart skipped a beat as I clicked it open. The subject line read simply, "We're selling." My chest tightened as I scrolled through her words. She wrote that the board, still reeling from revenue collapse and public backlash, had decided to sell Solace to a private equity firm by month's end. She admitted that she would be replaced, stripped of her CEO title, her carefully curated legacy unraveling. Yet beneath the news of her downfall, she conveyed something more personal, regret. "I never meant to hurt you," she wrote, "and I never meant to squander what we built together. Please understand that." At the end, I was terrified of my own mistakes. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking beneath me. 1,000 memories played across my mind. The late nights we had collaborated on pitch decks, the whispered debates over financial forecasts at 4 in the morning, the small victories I quietly engineered that she publicly celebrated. I felt the old pang of betrayal, but it was tempered now by the distance I had created. Larkwood was thriving on principles of transparency and mutual respect, principles she had abandoned. I composed my response carefully, each word measured. "You weren't scared of my power. You were afraid you didn't need it." It was a mirror of what I had told her in the hallway of Solace's offices on the day I reclaimed my own worth. I paused, reading the line again, ensuring it carried the precise weight of my conviction. Then I pressed send. Almost instantly, a reply notification appeared. Her message delivered in red. Rather than offer further apology or persuasion, I chose silence. I knew that to reply again would be to reopen a door I had firmly closed. Celeste had her own path to walk now, when I would no longer guide. Instead, I turned back to my work, pulling up the profiles of prospective clients I had invited to our next Larkwood strategy session. I drafted invites for Luciana, Tarek, and Anika, already envisioning the innovative solutions they would bring. As I typed, I felt the calm assurance of a man who had rebuilt his life on foundations of respect and collaboration. Minutes later, another chime sounded. This time, it was an incoming call from a Solace board member whom I had never met in person. Curious, I answered. His voice, tremulous yet cordial, thanked me for my candor and acknowledged that without my intervention, the sale might collapse entirely. He asked if I would consider advising the incoming leadership team post-acquisition. I smiled to myself, tasting irony. The very people who once overlooked me were now seeking my expertise. I muted the call, considered the offer for a moment, then declined softly, saying I was fully committed to Larkwood's vision. The board member's disappointment was palpable, but he understood. By the time I returned to my own suite, the drafting table was cleared, my tablet and tablet stylus glowing like torches in the dim light. I closed my laptop and stood. Moving to the recognition wall in the hallway, I traced the photos of my team's achievements, client testimonials, snapshots from company retreats, headlines celebrating Larkwood's rapid growth. Each image reminded me why I had chosen a new path rather than salvage an old empire. On my way out, I passed an encrypted message on my phone from a trusted former Solace colleague. "We all wish we had recognized you sooner." I tapped a brief reply. Better late than never. Then I locked the office and descended the elevator, the hum of the machinery a soothing cadence against the roar of downtown traffic below. Later that night, as I relaxed in my apartment overlooking the city lights, I reflected on the trajectory that had led me here, from overlooked strategist at Solace to architect of a sanctuary where talent flourished. Celeste's final email signified the end of an era, a closing chapter that I had already moved beyond. My future lay in the bright minds I nurtured and the innovative solutions we crafted together. I poured a glass of water and raised it in a silent toast to the journey, one defined not by titles awarded or taken away, but by the recognition we earn when we choose to build, uplift, and lead with integrity. I don't believe in revenge, but I do believe in reminders. Every morning, as sunlight filters through the blinds of my corner office at Larkwood Solutions, my gaze settles on the frame beside my desk. It holds the Solace promotion email, the one that began it all. To Griffin Miles. Subject, position filled. Message, nothing personal. Underneath, in bold gold letters, I added my own annotation. Recognition isn't given. It's taken. That frame is more than decoration. It's a testament to the moment I chose myself over unnoticed servitude. I often imagine Celeste passing by that frame in her new life, no longer CEO, stripped of the company she once commanded and feeling the weight of its message. But for me, it's not about her regret. It's about the promise I made to myself 9 years ago, the vow I kept when I could have begged or pleaded but instead orchestrated my own liberation. Each glance at the frame reminds me that silent labor deserves acknowledgement, that unseen hands can still shape destinies. Behind me, my team buzzes with activity. Luciana closing a multinational deal, Tarek finalizing quarterly forecasts, Anika refining the next-generation client portal. They know my story. They can recite the headlines. How 72% of Solace's revenue evaporated overnight. How Larkwood rose from those ashes. Yet they don't see the frame and my private note as arrogance, but as inspiration, proof that resilience and strategic courage can rewrite any narrative. Today, I have back-to-back meetings, a pitch to a prospect in renewable energy, a workshop on our equity-sharing model, and a late lunch with a former Solace executive who sought my counsel. I greet each with the same calm confidence I cultivated when I sent those 17 termination notices. I've learned that true power lies not in dramatic gestures but in purposeful actions executed with precision. As noon approaches, I step out onto the terrace adjoining my office. The skyline stretches endlessly, glass towers reflecting blue sky and the promise of opportunity. I inhale deeply, savoring the moment. My phone vibrates with a congratulatory message from a board member at Solace, now part of the acquiring firm, a message of belated respect for steering the sale responsibly. I let the notification sit unread. I don't need approval from that world anymore. Instead, I turn back inside, ready for the afternoon's work. I pause at the frame one last time, a private nod to the man I once was and the man I've become. The note beneath the original email isn't bitterness, it's affirmation. I forced recognition, reclaimed my worth, and built something better. And every day, that frame reminds me that the only validation that truly matters is the legacy we choose to create for ourselves.